Louisiana, United States. October 1944. The air hung heavy with heat and pine sap, thick enough to cling to the skin. Cicadas screamed from the trees beyond the wire fences, their rhythm steady and indifferent, as if the war had never reached this place at all. The transport truck came to a stop in a cloud of red dust. Thomas Hartman stood with the other guards, clipboard tucked under one arm, posture relaxed by routine rather than comfort. He had been stationed at Camp Claiborne long enough to learn one rule that mattered more than any order. Do not look too closely. Faces blurred together after a while. Prisoners came and went. Names were spoken, written down, forgotten. Looking too hard only invited memories. Memories a man like Thomas could no longer afford. He adjusted his glasses and spoke calmly, professionally, in the practiced tone of an American guard. Names will be called. Step forward when you hear yours. Women climbed down from the truck. German prisoners of war, thin, exhausted, eyes permanently alert, as if danger might still fall from the sky at any moment. Thomas flipped a page on his clipboard, and then he saw her. Not all at once, not like a lightning strike, more like a slow, impossible recognition that crept up his spine and stole the air from his lungs. The way she stepped down from the truck, the way her shoulders were pulled slightly inward, the way she held herself, as if bracing against a world that had never stopped hurting her. His heart missed a beat. No. For 6 years, Thomas had buried that face, under new uniforms, new papers, a new language. He had told himself she was dead, lost beneath rubble, smoke, and silence, believing that had been the only way to survive. Elise, his wife, standing behind barbed wire, a German POW. Thomas felt his grip tighten on the clipboard. His expression did not change. His stance did not falter. To anyone watching, he was just another American guard doing his job. Elise Hartman. She stepped forward. 20 yards, then 15, then 10. Thomas looked straight at the woman he had loved before the war took everything else from him. She lifted her eyes. Their gazes met and passed. There was no recognition in her face, no shock, no pause. Just the careful, distant look of a prisoner assessing a guard, measuring threat, nothing more. She did not know him. She did not see the man who once kissed her goodbye on a train platform, promising he would return before the leaves fell again. She saw a stranger, an American, the enemy. Thomas swallowed hard and forced his voice to remain steady, official, empty of everything it wanted to say. "Step to the left," he said. "You'll be assigned barracks shortly." She obeyed without hesitation. As she passed him, close enough for him to recognize the familiar shape of her face, close enough to confirm this was no illusion. She never once looked back. Thomas remained where he stood, the sounds of the camp rushing back around him all at once. She was alive. She was here. And she had no idea who he was, what Thomas did next, whether he spoke, whether he stayed silent, whether he allowed her to keep believing her husband was long dead, would decide not only her future, but who he truly was now. That night, Thomas lay awake on his bunk, staring at the wooden slats above him. Sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, Elise stood behind barbed wire again, her face turned away, her eyes seeing nothing of the man who had once promised her a lifetime. He tried to reason with himself. Trauma changes people. Years change faces. Perhaps she truly did not recognize him. Or perhaps she did, and the shock had numbed her. Either way, the result was the same. He was a ghost to her, and ghosts had no right to speak. Outside, footsteps passed. A guard laughed quietly at something. Life at the camp went on, indifferent to the war being fought inside one man's chest. Thomas turned onto his side and closed his eyes. 6 years ago, in a British interrogation room, an officer had leaned across the table and spoken gently, as if offering a kindness. "You can die a German," the man had said, "or you can live as something else." Thomas had chosen to live. Now, for the first time, he wondered what that choice had truly cost him. In the days that followed, Thomas learned that memory was not something one could command. He could stand at attention. He could follow orders. He could read reports, sign forms, walk his patrol routes, as if nothing had changed. But memory had its own discipline. It arrived without permission. He saw Elise everywhere, though she rarely looked at him. She moved through the camp with quiet efficiency, never lingering, never drawing attention. She queued when told, ate what was given, slept when allowed. Survival had refined her into something precise and contained. And yet, Thomas noticed the small things. The way she avoided loud voices. The way she flinched, not at shouted orders, but at sudden kindness. The way her hand sometimes stilled completely, as if waiting for something terrible to happen. He had seen that stillness before, in himself. Elise told herself she was imagining things. The camp was full of men who spoke German. Men who had lived in Europe before the war. Men whose accents carried echoes of cities she no longer recognized as real. And yet, something about him unsettled her. It was not his face. Faces blurred together after years of fear. It was not even his voice, not exactly. It was the pauses, the way he hesitated before saying her name, the way he looked at the ground when she passed, the way he never raised his voice with her, even when others did. Once, during ration distribution, another guard shoved her forward impatiently. She stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the table. Before she could react, the man, Thomas, she had learned his name was Thomas, said sharply in English, "That's enough." The other guard shrugged. "She's fine." Thomas did not argue. He simply stood there, silent, his jaw tight. Elise felt something twist in her chest. Protection was dangerous. Kindness even more so. She forced herself not to look at him again. At night, when the camp finally slept, Thomas remembered England. The interrogations had never involved violence, not directly. That was the worst part. They asked questions patiently, repeatedly, offering cigarettes, offering food, offering time. "You're not a Nazi," one officer had said, flipping through Thomas's file. "You're a mechanic, a civilian. This war isn't yours." Thomas had laughed then, a hollow sound. "It became mine when I was handed a rifle." The offer came weeks later. A transfer, lighter work, better conditions. "You speak English well," the American officer had noted. "You learn quickly." They never used the word traitor. They never had to. Thomas thought of Elise every night during those months. He imagined her waiting, believing in his return. The thought hurt so badly he eventually stopped allowing it. By the time he boarded the ship to America, he had trained himself to think of her as dead. It was the only way to stay alive. The rainstorm came without warning. Louisiana rain fell heavy and sudden, turning dirt into mud within minutes. Guards shouted. Prisoners were rushed indoors. The air filled with confusion and the sharp smell of wet earth. Elise was halfway down the steps when her foot slipped. She would have fallen, hard, if Thomas had not been there. He caught her by instinct, his arm wrapping around her waist, pulling her upright. Her body went rigid in his grasp. For a fraction of a second, neither of them moved. Up close, the illusion shattered completely. She was thinner. Yes, sharper. Harder. But she was unmistakably real. Her breath came fast, her fingers clenched into his sleeve. "I'm fine," she said in German. "Let go." The words slipped from him before he could stop them. "Sorry." also in German. She froze. Slowly, she pulled back and looked at him, not like a prisoner now, but like a woman trying to place a memory just out of reach. "You're not American," she said quietly. Thomas straightened, every muscle tense. "I am. Now." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Where are you from?" He should have lied. He had lied about worse things. But the rain, the closeness, the years of silence, it all pressed in on him. "Berlin," he said. Her breath caught. "My husband," Elise said slowly. "He was from Berlin." Thomas felt the words land between them like a live wire. "I'm sorry," he said. She studied his face, searching, comparing, weighing. "You sound like him," she said at last. "But he's dead." She stepped away before he could respond, and Thomas knew something irreversible had begun. That night, Elise dreamed of a kitchen she had not thought about in years. A chipped mug, a broken window latch, a man standing behind her, arms around her waist, whispering something she could not quite hear. She woke with tears on her face, and no explanation for them. The next day, she watched Thomas carefully, not openly, not foolishly. She watched the way he avoided her gaze, but always seemed aware of where she was. The way his shoulders tightened when her name appeared on a list. The way he spoke German only when no one else was close. Memory was a traitor, but it was persistent. It happened 2 nights later, during Thomas's patrol. Elise waited near the edge of the yard, heart pounding, rehearsing words she did not fully believe herself. When he passed, she spoke. "You knew my name." Thomas stopped. "You speak German like someone who lived there," she continued, "and you flinch when I say Berlin." He turned to face her slowly. "Who are you?" Elise asked. "Really?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then quietly, "Thomas." Her knees nearly gave out. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." "Yes." The word broke something open. The camp, the war, the years. All of it seemed to fall away. The camp, the war, the years. All of it seemed to fall away. She stared at him, seeing now what she had refused to see before. "It's you," she said, voice trembling. "You let me think you were dead." "I didn't let you," he said hoarsely. "I survived." Anger flared, hot and sharp. "You chose this," she said, gesturing to his uniform. "I chose to live," Thomas replied. "There's a difference." She struck him then, once hard. Not out of hatred, out of grief, out of 6 years stolen by silence. Then she collapsed against him, sobbing, fists clenched in his shirt. Thomas held her, knowing this moment would cost him everything, and accepting that cost willingly. They did not speak for a long time after that. Elise's sobs eventually quieted, turning into shallow, exhausted breaths against Thomas's chest. He did not try to comfort her with words. There were no words left that had not already been broken. When she finally pulled away, her face was rigid, not calm, but controlled. Control was something the war had taught her well. "You don't get to hold me like this," she said quietly. "Not without telling me everything." Thomas nodded. They sat on opposite ends of a bench near the edge of the yard, far enough from the lights that their faces were half-shadowed. The night air was cooler now, carrying the smell of damp pine and distant smoke. "I was captured in France," Thomas began. 1940. The retreat was chaos. We were running, then we weren't. Suddenly I was a prisoner. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if choosing the wrong word might undo him. "The British camp wasn't cruel," he continued. "Not in the way people imagine. That was worse. They waited. They asked questions. They watched us starve and offered help in pieces." Elise listened, arms folded tightly around herself. "When the Americans took over," he said, "they offered a choice. Not openly. Never openly. But it was clear. 'Cooperate,' Elise said, 'or disappear. Yes, her jaw tightened. So you chose them. I chose to live, Thomas said again, more quietly this time. I told myself that if I stayed alive long enough, the war would end. And maybe then I could come back to you. But you didn't, she said. No, he admitted, because the man I became couldn't go back, and because I thought you were dead. That last part landed differently. Elise's breath hitched. You thought I was dead? They told me Hamburg was destroyed, that there were no survivors from your district. His voice broke. I believed it because believing it was easier than hoping. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Elise spoke. I waited. Thomas looked up. For 2 years, she said. I waited for letters, for your name on a list, for anything. Then the bombings started. The neighbors left. The city burned. She swallowed. I told myself if you were alive, you would have found me. I tried, he said, in my head. Every night. That wasn't enough, she said flatly. No accusation. Just truth. They could not pretend nothing had happened. From that night on, their interactions changed, subtly, dangerously. They did not touch again. They did not speak privately. But the space between them was charged now, heavy with what had been revealed. Thomas became hyper-aware of every glance, every pause. He knew the risk he was taking. Any hint of impropriety could end his career, or worse. Yet he could not stop himself from watching over her. When Elise was assigned kitchen duty, Thomas made sure she wasn't scheduled for the heaviest shifts. When a guard spoke too harshly to her, Thomas intervened, not as a husband, but as an officer enforcing order. Elise noticed. She also noticed the cost. He slept less, smoked more. His hands shook when he signed reports. You're destroying yourself, she said once, when they found a rare moment alone near the fence. I already did, Thomas replied. I'm just feeling it now. The war shifted again in early 1945. Rumors spread faster than official orders. Germany was collapsing. Camps began preparing for releases, repatriations, relocations. One morning, Thomas found Elise's name on a preliminary list. Status: eligible for release pending review. His chest tightened. Freedom. For her. And separation. That evening, Elise stood across from him, holding the same paper. They're sending me back to Europe, she said. To a displaced persons camp in France. He nodded. That's standard. What about you? She asked. I stay, he said. This is my life now. She studied him carefully. Is it? She asked. The question hung between them. I don't know who I am without this uniform anymore, Thomas admitted. Elise looked away. I lost 6 years believing you were dead, she said. I survived because I accepted that. She met his eyes again. I won't survive if I have to bury you twice. What are you saying? He asked. I'm saying, she said slowly, that if you choose this life, you can't come with me. And if you choose me, her voice faltered, then steadied. You'll lose everything you built. Thomas closed his eyes. The choice he had avoided for 6 years stood naked before him at last. Survival or truth. The decision was made for him. A superior officer called Thomas into his office 2 days later. Sit, the man said. Thomas obeyed. We've received questions about your conduct, the officer continued. Nothing proven, but enough to be concerning. Thomas felt a strange calm settle over him. And? He asked. You're useful, the officer said. But usefulness has limits. You're being reassigned. Stateside facility, no prisoners, administrative work. Exile, not punishment, not forgiveness, just removal. As Thomas left the office, he realized something with startling clarity. The uniform had never truly protected him. It had only delayed the reckoning. Elise was scheduled to leave at dawn. The camp was quiet when Thomas found her near the fence, her few belongings packed in a small bag at her feet. "So?" she said softly. "This is it." "Yes." They stood facing each other, uncertain. "I don't forgive you," Elise said. "Not completely." "I don't expect you to," Thomas replied. "But," she continued, "I don't want to hate you either." Hope, fragile and terrifying, flickered between them. "Where will you go?" she asked. "Pennsylvania," he said. "Paperwork, offices, waiting." She nodded. "I'll be in France, for now." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Elise stepped forward and did what she had not done since before the war. She took his hand. "Find me," she said. "If you still want to." Thomas's throat tightened. "I will," he said. "Without uniforms, without lies." She smiled, a real smile, small but unmistakable. "That's the only way," she said. They parted without looking back. Pennsylvania. Autumn 1946. The cafe was small and unremarkable. That was why Thomas chose it. He sat by the window, hands folded around a cup of coffee he had not touched. Then the door opened. Elise stepped inside. No scarf, no guard towers, no wire, just a woman learning how to live again. Their eyes met. This time there was no hesitation, no distance, no forgetting. She crossed the room slowly. "You look different," she said. "So do you," Thomas replied. They sat. Silence this time was not an enemy. "Do you still believe in survival?" Elise asked. Thomas considered the question. "I believe," he said, "that surviving isn't the same as living. It just gives you the chance to choose again." Elise nodded. Outside, leaves fell onto the pavement, bright and ordinary. The war was over. What remained was what they chose to build next. Together.